Peace and power. Once again, it's the Panther 48, and today we're going to have a discussion on dehumanizing, the definition, how it has been utilized throughout the Black community, and how it interferes with the development, liberation of the community as a whole. I'm going to pass the mic to Brother E and allow Brother E to give us a build and a breakdown on his concepts and ideas of dehumanizing.
All right, I hate to go first, but appreciate it.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, just dehumanizing in the broadest context is anything that's intended, meant to, or even accidentally takes away any of the human traits of another human being. Whether you're talking about in terms of us, always in terms of us, you're talking about Marion Sims, this doctor, this U.S. doctor back in like 1850s, 1840s, somewhere around there, who in the U.S., the dude is known as the father of modern gynecological surgery. He basically, one of the things he did was to create this thing called a vaginal speculum, which is basically the thing they use when they're examining women to go in there and hold it apart, down there, so they can see up in there and check them out. So he invented like the first modern, and he's praised and high regard and high respect. The dehumanization comes in with the fact that, number one, the way that he was able to learn so much about a woman's plumbing, her inner workings of vaginal areas, was that he would take African women that were enslaved and do experiments on them. He would figure things out. He would cut them, slice them, look inside them, all of that good stuff. But not only did he do that, he did it without the application of any type of anesthesia. He didn't numb these sisters up at all. So they were just raw, and he's cutting on them surgically and busting them open. The second part of the dehumanization in that process is the fact that to this day, American medical journals and the American medical community will still look at this dude with a high level of regard and esteem and respect, because he was the father of gynecological surgery in this country. He's given all of this credit, which basically says this was a great doctor. Yeah, he did some stuff that was kind of, messed up, but still, he's a great doctor. He's pushing off the fact that he experimented raw on African people, on African women, knocks their value in the equation down to a level of not being important, not being human. It's okay because they weren't really human. The chick, I forget her name, it may pop into your head, but this woman who was the mother of the eugenics movement in this country that eventually became Planned Parenthood. Hillary Clinton, not too long ago, gave this woman high honor and praise, talking about how she admired and respected her and all of this, even though this woman was a straight up devout racist. She wanted to get rid of the less desirable racial aspects of the community by sterilization and whatnot. Ideas that got passed down into Planned Parenthood, which is why Planned Parenthood is a problem in our community. So things from that level down to, obviously you bust into somebody's house and shoot them while they're sleeping and whatnot, and you don't get charged. What's his name? Michael Vick got like 4 years for animal cruelty for what he was doing with the fighting the dogs and all of that. But out of the last, I don't know, 500 or 600 cops that have killed black men, he got more time than all of them put together. So that's dehumanizing, because it's basically saying, you can kill up to 700 black men and it still don't work. It ain't worth in value what happened to these dogs. It's the fact that George Washington is counted as a great man. You bring up the fact, well, but he owned black people. He raped black women, African women, your grandmother, great-great-grandmother, and all of that. He raped them. Well, yeah, but that was the way of the times. It's not that big a deal. It's playing down to the fact that you're a human being and you're involved, even if it's just words. This chick that in Central Park that told this black dude that she got into an argument. They call them Becky's or Karen's or whatever they are. He told her something about not having her dog on a leash, And she just went left and started said, "I'm gonna call the police and tell them there's an African American man here harassing me." You know, basically knowing that her life is worth more than his, knowing that what that threat carries with it, that your life, you know, ain't shit. So you better watch yourself. I'll pull this trigger. If it's we not having our history taught in, or our role in history in any classroom. You know, it's minimizing our role and our impact, and it's taking away our human character. If it's reducing us to the role, to a stereotype, you know, black men can jump, you know, black men run fast, black people run fast, black folks got rhythm, or white folks can't dance, you know, implies that, you know, only black folk can dance. You're reducing us to this one thing. It's like if I call you an alcoholic, I'm defining your person, your reality as being an alcoholic. No, I'm a man who may have a problem with alcoholism. I may have an addiction, but I'm not an addict. That's not my definition. So anything that looks to pull away and tear away at our humanity and our being human being is what dehumanization is. Any of those things, it's not just the government, it's, you know, it's movies, it's TV, it's LeBron James on the front of the, I think it was Sports Illustrated or whatever, where he had the basketball in one hand and he's posed like he's a beast, you know, he's raw, and his in his other arm is wrapped around a white girl. He looking like King Kong. You know, you're reducing him to this animalistic characteristic. You're not a human being. What's his name? Durant. I think how recently it was. Tore, I think he tore a ligament or something in his leg. When he fell in the middle of the game, he fell and was holding and wincing, and like you could look at him and tell this wasn't no just oops, I hurt my leg right quick. This was turns out to be an injury that is for at least the rest of the season, maybe longer. But he's sitting there on the floor, you know, just wincing in pain. And you got folks from the other team, the fans in the crowd from the other team laughing and taunting, you know, hey, goodbye, making fun of him. They've reduced him, they're in effect reducing him to just this game player, not a human being who's sitting on the fucking floor in pain, who's hurt, who may have his entire career and his dream and his goals and everything just gone. You know, fuck that. He's just a game player. He's just a ball player. That's all he is. So it's taking away the fact that he's a human being and reducing him to just this one little piece, this one little thing that he does. And you know, all of that ultimately falls back on us, but I guess that's a topic for another discussion. But basically most everything we experience day in and day out, every single day, is an attempt to dehumanize African people, because the system was founded on the idea that we're not even human. That's one of the ways they excused it and got around with the whole Catholic Church and all of that nonsense. You can go ahead and enslave them because they're not really human. And they built an entire American medical community around the idea that African people are subhuman. Look up Obatenga, O-B-A, second word, T-O-N-G-A. If you put Oba space T in YouTube, it should come up. But basically, this was a brother, a pygmy, so-called pygmy, that white folks took out of Africa and put him, and this is the middle of the last century. So this is like in 20s and 30s and all of that, 40s, and put him in a cage in the United States with a chimpanzee, and that's where he lived. And they would charge people to come in and look at him as a specimen of something that's not quite human. It's this subhuman, this link between man and the apes. Dehumanization, not just of him, but of African people across the board. So it's everything in the society, because everything in the society is built on the precipice, not just of racism, white supremacy, but the implication, the dark side of it, so to speak, the dark side of the moon, the thing that we don't even say, which is African inferiority. So it's built on in the system being that, and people having that mindset. You've seen the pictures of the brother getting lynched, and the little white girl, he's hanging up and he's in a tree and his head is all just kicked, and there's all these people around, and there's this one little white girl down in the front of the crowd looking straight up at the camera with a little grin on her face. That's dehumanizing. That's dehumanization, and it's bred into generationally, so it becomes the norm. But that idea that we're subhuman is built in, so everything that we come across, everything that we do has that underlying premise that we're less than. So it's actually a system of dehumanization that goes, you can't have racism, white supremacy that says that white folks are superior and not have a dehumanizing effect for everybody, especially us, and not have that component that says, you know, yes, we are what humans are, white folks, and then bringing this African who looks the same other than color and lips and, you know, some superficial stuff. You can't have this is human, this is superior, and not have this is not human. If this is the definition of human, everything else is not human. So everything else has to be dehumanized. And the more hated, the more different that other person is from white, the more dehumanization has to go on, the more it has to be proven, the more it has to be reinforced generation over generation. So yeah, there you go. Now your turn, War.
Mine's gonna be a lot simpler. So the way I look at it is, yeah, believe it or not, this time it's a little more simpler. The way I look at it, in just the process itself of dehumanizing, first you're dealing with it, I like to deal with it from an alphabetic relationship. So we're talking D, so moving backwards or taking a person backwards would be C, B, and A. So to me, that C is capture. The B is break, and then the A is assemble. So when you're dehumanizing, you want to capture, break, and then assemble. So that capture part to me goes into anything that you can utilize to gain control of an individual, whether you do it through their mental, physical, or spiritual. So like, for instance, to give you to me, one of the greatest instruments used to dehumanize would be music. So to capture a group of people, or just say their attention, just like how it's done through rap music, they basically hit you with that beat. When they hit you with that beat, they got you bobbing. Now that you're bobbing, the message can come in and infiltrate you. So that's the capture standpoint. So regardless of what words are being thrown behind that music, it calls you to lower your guard simply because of the beat itself, the rhythm that connects with you. That rhythm that connects with you, that hypnotic rhythm, what I would call it, is basically the precursor in a way to capture your mind or capture your attention, to be able to lower your guard. So now that I can come in and I can break. So the breaking process goes into the actual knowledge or words or any information that's used or methodologies that's used to be able to tear you down spiritually, mentally, as well as physically from from your natural self. So from that standpoint, they break you. And then not only do they break you, but the idea in breaking someone is to be able to put a process in place that allows that breaking to continue from generation to generation. So that, you know, that goes into the concept of epigenetics, in terms of being able to implant something within you to force you or cause you to repeat the same cycle through the next generation. And then they come back with the assembly or reassemble and build you back up according to the needs of that dehumanized individual. So from that standpoint, now that the assembly takes place, is now what are the uses of this broken human being? What are the uses of it? So from that standpoint, what they got catered and operated for us is to work and deal with everything at the bottom. So having us at the bottom, the idea at that point is to, when you're dealing with a dehumanized and a domesticated being at that point, the idea is to make you a pure consumer, to make sure that in those that are producing, to make sure you don't get credit for any production, as well as being used as a battle cry or rally point to be able to awaken other minds. So to keep you in a consumption-based position, it to me is basically saying that you're going to continue to be cattle. And what we're going to do is we're going to raise that cattle. And what you always want to do from that standpoint is make sure that the cattle remains broken, so that it continues to feed and continues to consume everything that's necessary for it to remain in the position of being a dehumanized individual, dehumanized population. So again, I look at that as simple as CBA. And that's my part.
And let me throw in there real quick. We've heard it said many times that you can't enslave a people when they respect themselves, when they see themselves as human beings.
Yep.
Which is why white man in all his wisdom, before we came to the U.S. Proper, our first stop is Paul Mooney, and I'm not going to try to quote him because it's real funny, but he says essentially that the only difference between black folks that came up here in the U.S. and black folks in the Caribbean is that the black folks in the Caribbean are the ones that got dropped off first. So the idea with the Caribbean and the islands, the Dominican, the Puerto Rico, Cuba, all of these were collectively many times known as breaker islands. And the idea was to break, just like you would break a horse, because no wild animal, no free animal, no self-respecting animal is going to let you ride them or ride them into town to the general store or till your crops and all of that. You have to first break that horse or break that bull or break whatever it is. You have to break the spirit. And so that's what the Breaker Islands were about, was breaking that spirit, breaking that identification up so that we could then be further broken down, manipulated, and put into these various roles that helped us be productive, not for ourselves, but for someone else. And in so doing, generationally, and this is where it's much more effective, generationally, it's become a situation where it's very much remote control. Let's call it automatic, systematic remote control. We dehumanize one another, whether it's that bitch or my nigga or any of the other things that we say to one another, or looking at our children and saying, you black motherfucker, you know, or calling our children niggas. Any of these things are ways that we've been programmed to dehumanize each other, to keep each other in check. And I'm gonna step into the area that I don't usually like to, but religion just as well. The story of Ham, the whole, he saw Noah, and so he, his descendants were cursed or something along those lines, to be basically to be us. Told for years that that's how black folk was created, that we're a curse to Noah and his family and all of that, because of the sin that was committed at that point in time. And we pass that around as, even if it's unspoken, we pass that around as a reality and further dehumanize one another.
True indeed. True indeed. I want to touch on some points that y'all just made, especially dealing with the breaking. And Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad was very eloquent in explaining this, and Malcolm X was too. So the information is not new. Just like you just said, Brother E, they didn't just take human beings from Africa, bring them to America, and say, okay, you're a slave now, and a human being accepted the role of being a slave. No human being accepts that. A human being has to be trained and broke, as you just said, the spirit, the very humanity has to be stripped from the human being for the human being to accept the role of an animal. That has to be stripped away. So they would take people, human beings from Africa, and take these people, these human beings, to the Caribbean islands, different places in the Caribbean island. Matter of fact, is important to know, because I used to get in a lot of debates with brothers that didn't understand this. We were watching the Olympics one time, and there was a lot of sisters running for Brazil. And a brother said, man, that looks just like a black woman. Them look just like black women running from Brazil. I was like, they are. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They are black women. No, them are Brazilians. I say, what in your mind, what defines a black person? And how do you think those people got to Brazil? Who are those people? The only difference between the people in Brazil or the people in the Dominican Republic or the people in Haiti is that they was enslaved by a different white man that spoke a different language. That's it. That's the only difference. They went to a certain part of Africa. One of them might have went to North Africa. One might have went to South Africa. One of them might have been from Spain. One of them might have been from France. And they took them to that particular island that they had conquered in the quote unquote New World. And that's what makes them. That's what makes the difference between a Haitian and the difference between a Dominican. But anyway, back to the point. So that's how all those people, black people, got in the Caribbean. And there are more black people that was taken to the Caribbean because that was the first stop. Then there was actually black people brought to America. I can't remember the exact number. I remember the number of the first Africans that were brought to America. I don't remember the first Africans that were took to Brazil, but it was in the hundreds. The first Africans that stopped here was 11. It was 11 in Jamestown, Virginia, but it was hundreds that were taken to Brazil. So there was more African people taken to Brazil, to the Dominican Republic, to Haiti than that was brought here. So anyway, back to the point. So as you just said, that yes, they was taking there to these breaker islands where they would, and I'm gonna give an example, just one small example of one of those breaking processes. They would take one of the biggest, strongest, most respected black men, African brothers, that everybody knew of. This brother might have been known for killing lions back on the continent, and they bring this brother out. And all the hell that they had brought on African people, the African women and African children would look and say, oh, they're in trouble now. He done brought out Matumbu. They in the world of trouble now, boy. They don't know what they've done. And Matumbu will be brought out, and Matumbu will be tied to trees that they would strategically tie toward the center, and they would tie Matumbu to these trees and then cut the ropes, and the trees would fly and rip Matumbu apart.
I remember that.
And the men, and the women and the children would look at this and be like, oh my God, men's limbs have been ripped off in front of me. Or they are doing like they did the brother in Jasper and tie him behind a horse and drag him into pieces. They would do the brother like this. And so this would create fear in the women and the children's mind to think to themselves that even our greatest warriors cannot save us from this menace. Even our greatest soldiers does not have the ability to defend us from what we have found ourselves dealing with. And they would do it sometimes in the presence of pregnant women. They would bring pregnant women forward with the fruit of their womb and watch this type of destruction done upon the black men in hopes that the fear would bathe her brain and it will course through her veins and eject itself into the baby so that the baby itself will be born afraid of a cruel slave master. And if you ever study The Art of War by Sun Tzu, Sun Tzu says, he essentially says that the intelligent general eliminates the enemy in his mother's womb. And if you think deep, that's how you do it. That's how you eliminate the enemy in his mother's womb, through carefully devised strategy. So those are I just wanted to touch a little bit on the process of the breaking. Once you have done that to the people in the Caribbean, then they brought us here to America, where you was prepared to play your role as a docile slave. And as in Soul on Ice, Eldridge Cleaver explained it, and Huey P. Newton broke it down in deeper detail. But slavery ended up creating certain types of people. In the black man, it created the minute minuscule, basically the unthinking brute. In the black woman, it was created the ultra feminine Amazon. That's what they called her, because without her man there to play the role of a man, she had to become stronger. She had to become more fortified. The black woman could be raped at will. So she had to strengthen her mind so that she wouldn't psychologically break down from this. So she became the ultra feminine, the ultra feminine Amazon to the point. I mean, not the ultra feminine Amazon, but the self-reliant Amazon, to the point that she's independent. I don't need a man. They make songs about it. Independent, all my women. They make songs about this mind state. Then the white woman, because she was made to be the criteria for beauty and ladyhood, she was put aside and she became the ultra feminine freak. She was put aside. She was put in the house. The slave master would even convince her that I have to go out there to the slave quarters and rape the slave woman and do the things I do with her, because you're so pure, you don't deserve to get these things that I do to her. You don't supposed to be treated in this way. And the slave master himself became the omnipotent administrator. These are the terms that Eldridge Cleaver used in Soul on Life when explaining these roles. And the way he broke it down was this, that because the omnipotent administrator, the slave master, controlled everything, he did all the thinking, but he did no physical work. So he ended up getting flabby and soft and fat and weak. And the slave himself was not allowed to think for himself, but he did all the physical work. So his body became strong, but he no longer knew how to think. And in the process, the slave master became the ideal of what a man looked like physically. why the slave himself became the idea of what a man looked like physically. And so he was able to attract more women to the point where the slave master was sitting out, he was drinking his lemonade, sitting on the porch in the sun, watching all his slaves work, admiring what he'd done with his plantation. And he's, Susie, Becky, bring me some lemonade, girl. And his wife come out with the lemonade, and he waiting for the lemonade, and he don't get his lemonade, and he like, what is this woman there with this? And he look, and she's been standing there. She's standing there at the door holding the jar of lemonade, and she's lusting over Tom, because Tom is out there with his shirt off, muscles bulging, lifting logs, swinging an axe, and she's looking at him sweating, and she sees manhood, and it appeals to her feminine nature. And he sees this, the slave master sees this, and he creates a form of jealousy. So he calls Tom over. He said, Tom, come here, boy. Let me talk to you. And he tells Tom, he says, you know my penis stretches farther than yours. And, you know, Tom looked at him like, what the hell is he talking about? And he said, no, my penis goes further than yours. You see, I can have the black woman and I can have the white woman at will. You can only have the black woman when I allow you to. When I don't feel like occupying that space, you can have her. And you better not even look at the white woman with any kind of, better not whistle at her. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna let you. You understand that, boy? And Tom understood his role. He understood his position. Yes, sir, boss. And you can see all of this, these dehumanizing effects throughout our entire history, even to the point that when we start getting little, I hate to use this word, but I can't think of a better one, little freedoms, sports stars and actors, when they'd come up and get wealthy, the first thing they would do is leave a black wife that was with them while they were poor and get with a white woman. Kanye West did a song about it, jokingly about it before he did it. When he said that when he get on, he leave you ask for a white girl. Get that, I can't remember the name of the song, but these are some of those dehumanizing things that black people, and these are just touches on it. This does not do the subject justice in no way, form, or fashion. Easy to read and understand one is Malcolm X on Afro-American history, where he breaks this process down, but he breaks it down in an easy, off-the-cut chat and speeches. That's a great little small book to read to get a deeper understanding of it. A deeper build on the subjects themselves is The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. That book will give you a deeper understanding of the processes. But these are just things, and like Brother E said earlier, and it's not just the physical things either. It's a mentality, it's a psychology, because you have to understand, if you go to prison and you do in Texas, and you do over 10 years in prison in Texas, they will make you go through a program before they release you into the streets. If you do over 20 years, you got to sit with a psychologist for them to analyze you and see what kind of psychological damage has been done before they release you into the streets. Ask yourself why. Because they know and they understand that being in that type of condition for such a long time will basically take away the ability for you to operate like a normal, balanced human being. They understand this. Literally, if you do 20 years in Texas, you have to sit with a psych doctor if you make parole before they'll release you out. And if you do over 10, you have to go through a program that's supposed to reprogram your thinking in 6 months to help you adjust from the 10 years you just dealt with, so that you can be able to deal with the world properly. Now imagine what happens to people that have been slaves all of their life, born in slavery, die in slavery, and pass slavery on to their kids for centuries. And there was no program. There was no psych evaluations. You're free, is what was said. And then you go into society and try to live life like a normal human being. You may not be in shackles anymore, but you will pass down that slave culture to your children and your children's children, to the point to where this slave culture becomes so normal when anybody talks against it. When Brother E tells you something's wrong with you calling yourself a nigga, you think, man, what's wrong with that word nigga? That's the thought process comes to mind. That nigga's crazy, saying that we can't call each other niggas. We've been calling each other niggas forever. And that's the major effects that dehumanizing have had on the black community as a whole.
Let me jump in on this. I would say, kind of going back to what you was talking about that one example with the child that's in the mother's womb. I refer to that as the dismounting of the kinetic spirit. Because keep in mind that what happens is there's chemicals that are going through that fallopian tube down into the umbilical cord down into the child's body, and those chemicals are inducing fear. So the fear is actually being exposed to that child before that child can actually have his own sight and senses associated with fear. So and so what happens, that's why I refer to that also as the epigenetics, so that child is born knowing a sense of fear of the slave master before ever actually seeing the slave master, just based on what's passed down to it. And so at that point, that the dismounting of the kinetic spirit moves over to the potential mind that would have known freedom and would have operated and looked at freedom in a certain way, that's going to automatically have a certain docile and certain broken spirit as it applies and operates throughout life. And then all the examples that it's going to be able to associate with that look and act and that look like it is going to be, again, broken in terms of what they are. And anyone that goes outside of that pattern obviously gets dealt with. So then you deal with basically a population that is, from that standpoint, the most broken of that population. And just like what you said in regards to, if you just all of a sudden let it go, so to speak, and release it back into its normal environment or natural environment, how do you do that with something that has no longer has a connection with that natural environment? It's frightening and it's fearful. So just like how you said with the whole prison example, the deal is the comfort zone is to be back into that cage, to be back into that environment that allows it to not have to think, to not have to be in control and told what to do, how to do, and when to do it. So mentally, that's where we still find ourselves. So as a people, when we talk about being able to be a self-determined people and being able to be in control of our own, most of us can't relate. And most of us think that's a crazy and far out concept and far beyond what Black people are capable of. Why? Because genetically, through the centuries of dealing with enslavement, we have lost our connection with our ability to wield forth our strength and our ability to be natural with our environment and to be in control of ourselves. So that is a process of unbreaking that has to take place. The same way you dealt with capturing the mind, the same way you dealt with breaking the spirit and then assembling of that docile being, we have to reverse that and go back now from CBA to ABC. So now we have to deal with the assembly of the righteous individual and the unbreaking of the slave, and then the capture of our greatness and who we are and what we can become, which obviously is the whole idea of colonization. So that same process has to take place. Not to say that it needs to be as long in terms of our enslavement, but the point being is the spirit, the mind, and the body has to get recalibrated to the correct being and the correct relationship within science and life itself. And that there is no shortcuts to doing so. We have to go about it accordingly. So we have to go back in reverse, or should I say forward motion, in terms of what we are as a people. And each individual actually has to be willing to take that journey for the sake of its own DNA pattern.
True indeed, true indeed. And here's one of the beauties of the human being. Here's one of the beauties of the human being himself. The human being has the ability to completely rewire his thought process through his learning. The human being actually has that ability, that skill. No other creature on the planet really has that ability. But the human being can rewire his thinking, the way he views the world, the way he views himself. He can change all of it. Maybe not overnight, but he can change. It's part of the process of why things like prayer works. Brother E said earlier he don't like to get into the subject of religion. I don't care too much for religion. I get into the subject on the opposite side of it in a heartbeat though. But one of the reasons that prayer works is because even though Even though I don't believe you're praying to some spooky thing floating around in the sky, the process of focusing your attention, your mental abilities toward one directed goal in a positive manner has the way to actually draw certain things toward you into your reality and to actually make you believe. And the more you believe in something positive happening for you, the greater the possibility is that you're going to move on that positivity. I don't believe I can flap my hands and fly. I just don't believe in it. And since I don't believe it, you'll probably never see me running around outside flapping as hard as I possibly can because I just don't think it's going to happen. But I do believe I can get in my vehicle, flip the key over, and drive down to. So I believe in that. So I do that with ease. I guarantee you, if I didn't believe I could do it, I wouldn't even try it because I'm not insane. And I don't try to do anything I don't believe in. And that's where the changing of the way we think, the way we view reality, the way we view ourselves, smaller things like that changes the way that we respond to things that's happening in our world. Once you start changing the way you, when I was a little kid, I'll use this as a great example. When I was a little kid, and a partner of mine reminded me of this because I have business ventures I'm supposed to start. And I was telling him about a risk that I'm supposed to take in order to create these business ventures. And this friend of mine told me, he said, well, you might as well try it. If you fail, you just fail. I told him no such thing. I don't believe in that. You can't even tell me nothing like that. I got one rule in life. I will not lose. I don't fail. I never fail. Even if what I try to do does not succeed, it's not a failure. It's one step closer to success because it shows me what does not work. Period, point blank. And when I was a kid, I used to watch this show called Gargoyles. I don't know if y'all remember. Y'all remember Gargoyles?
Yeah.
The villain in the show was called David Xanatos. He was the one that was always trying to capture and kill the gargoyles. And he would lose every show. He would quote unquote lose. And I loved his thought process though, because he had this helper named Owen. And Owen would always tell him, well, you failed again, Mr. Xanatos. And Xanatos would tell Owen, he would say, no, I didn't, Owen. I just learned what didn't work. We're one step closer to beating the gargoyles. You know, that was the way the dude thought. And I thought that was a powerful mind state to have, to think or to see to view your successes and failures in such a way. And that's one of the things that African people need to do. Malcolm called it to take a mental migration back to Africa. We have to start rewiring the way we view reality, the way we see things, the way we see ourselves, and the tools, the psychological tools that we use in order to navigate our reality here in America.
And I think that's why, you know, we so easily throw these words around that are actually a part of the dehumanizing aspect, because we don't see one another as human beings. We call each other everything, every word you can imagine that we can figure out how to wrap our mouths around this English language to get it out. We'll call each other that, except a human being. We'll even call each other African as a put down, generally speaking. But that's why, for me, there's a need for the emphasis for us to refer to one another as African, because African and human being are synonymous. They're the same thing. At one point in time, that's all there was. If you want to talk to a human being, you would be talking to an African. And if you were speaking to an African, you were talking to what a human being by definition was at that point in time. So to begin to reestablish our humanness and get away from the dehumanizing and dehumanizing process, the process of dehumanization, is to assert that humanness by calling ourselves something that does assert that our humanity, and that thing is African. You know, to begin to reverse the dehumanizing and to step away and to basically put ourselves back into that domestication mindset. And so yeah, it's you know, other examples, when I don't know if you know Michael Brown in Ferguson. One thing they love to do is whenever there's a situation, the first thing they'll do in regards to the black dude is bring up his rap sheet, every criminal offense he ever had. Oh, he was wanted for this and he did this and blah, 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 blah. But just as was the case with Michael Brown, they talked about, you know, supposedly the negative things that he had supposedly done. But I don't recall ever once hearing anybody saying he was 2 days away from starting college. You know, this dude was working on his little rap career like so many others on, you know, SoundCloud and uploading his stuff. But at the same time, he graduated high school and was about to start college. They don't bring that up. So the human, gone. You're just a criminal. And we believe that we're criminals because we refer to each other as criminals and all of that. And we ride right along with it. And when we see it on the news and somebody breaks it down, it doesn't surprise us. It doesn't offend us. It doesn't take away because, yeah, he was doing something. But when we bring up, oh, yeah, he was a college student, by the way, that what? We're surprised. We're taken aback by that because we've invested in our lack of humanity and the idea that we're not human beings, and we roll with it. So we do it, like I said, we do it to ourselves and we buy in. It's just those so many little things that go on day in and day out that reassert that you're not a human being. You're a nigger, you're a nigger, you're a nigger. Whether it's saying the word or it's doing whatever it is, it's reinforcing that idea that we're not human beings. So, it's not, the idea, I don't think, is that we'll ever in our lifetime get to a point where we don't do these things. Psych, you dehumanize yourself and each other. I do it. War does it. We all do it because it's been programmed over the course of 30, 40, 50 years. So there's some things that we're not even aware that we do that are playing into that nonsense. But the idea is just to become aware of as much of it as possible and to begin to flush that out by doing things, by abstaining from those things that we're aware of while investing in things that assert our humanity and begin to put us back on that right direction. So it's not, you know, I know a lot of people a lot of times get overwhelmed, like, man, it's a lot, you know, I can't do nothing about it. That it's little steps, it's little things. It's just the small things and just being aware that they're there, how we interact with our children. You know, the idea that we're responsible. I love Charles Barkley. He's such a dick. And I came to that conclusion when I heard him say that he's not a role model. I'm not a role model. I'm not out here for anybody to look up to and emulate. But nigga, please. We're all role models because we're all modeling some role in the society, whatever that role is, whether aware of it or not, whether it's positive, negative, whatever it is, we're modeling a role. But because we're individuals, which is counter to our humanity, counter to our Africanness, if we simply take on the responsibility of the children in the room, let me conduct myself in a certain way. Let me, not say this, not say that. Let me not say any negative stuff about my baby mama in front of the children, because that's a part of the dehumanization. That's a part of taking away. But if I stay away from doing that and do other, I'm moving us ever so slightly back in that positive direction. And like you were saying, we build on that. If we focus on that and we think about that, it gains momentum. We dwell on it, then it starts to become, it's not just because a thought passes through your mind. Thoughts pass through mine all the time. Trust me, I know. It's those thoughts that we hold on to and that we dwell on and that we give their energy to. So if we start dwelling on the other direction, instead of the dehumanizing things that we do, we'll start to slowly start to turn that corner and start to do other things. I've been fortunate and blessed. I have 4 children. All of them are of age enough, and none of them coked out, blunted out. None of them sitting up getting high all the time. They're not alcoholics. Ain't no baby mamas and baby daddies. I'm almost 50. I have no grandchildren. And my oldest is almost 30 now. So, just that little bit, and I'm not bragging, I'm just making a point that just that little bit, it ain't changed the world in the way people think about it, but it changed the world because now there are 4 people in this world, just from doing little bitty things. There are 4 people in this world who have a better perspective and may be able to turn it a little bit more. So just as this damage was done generationally over 400 years, we have to begin to do things generationally in increments, in little steps, and just start to move ourselves We're still trying to do the big picture, and all of a sudden we're free. Now, just take the little steps and begin to turn that corner so that eventually we'll be headed in a better direction.
And that is the process of revolution. Brother Wall, do you have anything you want to say about this before we close it out?
Well, let me jump in on the whole thing about the incrementalization, because I think it's important that the people learn and recognize from a solution-based perspective what we're talking about in reverse or forward or moving forward with the process of rehumanizing, is that we have to take incremental steps. Don't feel like, or don't be bombarded or overwhelmed with the process of how we became and got into this position, because the more we learn, the more we recognize that there's more learning and more growth and more work to do. We can't let that deter us and let that overwhelm us from the fact that we have to make a change and we have to take steps. There is no such thing as being at the point of no return as it applies to liberation and our freedom as a people. And unfortunately, dealing with things from a religious perspective, we think that that crystallized thought and that linear thinking puts us in that position where we just have to make the best of the dehumanized process. And that is not the case. That is farthest from the truth. And that is one of the first things that a broken spirit would try to convince and rationalize itself in order to stay in that same place and not move. So yes, we have to take incremental steps, moving away from that broken being, moving away from being dehumanized back to being human again. And like you said earlier, in regards to the neural nets, they can be rewired and they are designed to be rewired. We just have to take advantage of the fact that we are humans and recognize the fact that we have a responsibility and an obligation to do, not just simply for ourselves as individuals or just for the family, but for the community and for the planet, in order to get things back right and get things back in the correct cycle, so that we can reverse the damage that is continually being done as a result of us not taking our rightful place as Africans in a position of being in control of a natural environment that will put things back in perspective and back in contact with the natural way of life. So it is an obligation and a responsibility and a duty for all of us as Africans to go back to being humans.
And there have been a number of studies done by your buddies, white folks, that have that they've played classical music or some other music for children as they were in the womb, before they were born. So they're still inside of their mothers. And once a child is born, them following their progression, numbers of children, not just one or two, but several, many children, to do the studies to look at the possible effects of the energy that's projected while that child is still in the womb. And that there's been, in their mind, there's been a notable, and I believe it's true, a notable effect. And that's one of the reasons my youngest, when she was in the womb, we would play, there was we had a CD of these songs, these bedtime type songs. It's sung in various African languages. And they were from, our tradition. So we would play them for her. Now, that don't mean that she, when she was born, she popped out the womb like, Habari Gani. It doesn't happen like that. She didn't come out the womb speaking, Swahili, anything like that. But being able to affect and just do those little, it doesn't take much of anything if you're pregnant, when you lay down to go to sleep, to put on a CD of something that's productive and powerful and positive and moving us in a direction. Just little stuff like that moves us, and I guess with the things that we've said in the last few minutes, that kind of leads us to another question is will we see revolution in our lifetime? Maybe that's the topic for another discussion.
True indeed. This subject, dehumanizing, is a subject that can actually be a course. It can be an online conference, because the subject can be so long, as far as identifying what it is, how it has been utilized toward our detriment, how it's being utilized today, and solutions for getting out of it. I mean, there's a deep breakdown and build on this subject matter. So we promise to come back to you with these subjects, with this information. Subscribe to the Panther 48 YouTube channel, like the videos, leave your comments, down below in the comment section. Tell us what you like, what you didn't like. If you disagree, debate the concepts. We're willing to meet you there. We're willing to have you on the channel to debate the concepts openly and live if you want to. So hopefully to next time we gave you some good information. All power to the people and peace.